2022 meeting of the Planning Commission. Few items just before we officially get started. This meeting is on Comcast channel local 27 and on the Pacific Coast TV's website. We currently have some community members in the audience this evening, and everyone is allowed to and has the opportunity to speak this evening. Just a review for the attendees. The Planning Commission Chair will open a general public comment at the beginning of our agenda, and then we'll also open up public comment for specific items. During that time, those who want to speak will be recognizing by raising their hand or their icon hand. I will assist with public comment and allow each person to speak. If you have dialed by telephone only, you can push *6 to mute and unmute your hand and *9 to raise and unraise your hand. Otherwise, the computers, tablets, iPhones will have the icon feature on your tablet, and you can just press it to raise your hand to speak. 3 minutes of time will be given to each commenter, and the time will be shown up on the screen. As of right now, I did not get any public comment. I don't think anything was sent. I personally did not send anything to the commission, so I believe that there was no additional public comment that was submitted after the packet was sent out, but staff can confirm during presentations. Thank you for your patience during this continued remote learning or remote meeting, sorry. And I will now hand over the gavel, virtual gavel, to Chair Ruddick to officially begin this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Bridget. It's my pleasure to open this meeting, January 11th, 2022, the first meeting of 2022. And will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to start?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Bridget, would you be so kind as to call the roll of the commission?
Yes, Commissioner Hernandez.
I am present.
Commissioner Gorn.
Here.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Good to hear, Bridget.
Vice Chair Polgar. Here. And Chair Ruddick.
Here.
All commissioners are present this evening.
Excellent. Brings us to discussion of the minutes of our last meeting, December 14th of 2021. Commissioner Benjamin.
Yeah, thank you. I had no problem with the minutes. I will note that the minutes included the full staff report for several items. They were quite long, roughly 540 pages. I did not compare them. I just want to verify that these were in fact the same ones that were presented to us, that there were no changes other than the addition of some correspondence that was received late that might have just been a few pages. Since this will be the record of the item, I want to be sure we have the right one.
Would staff like to respond?
Yes, I didn't know that. Well, give us a moment to take a look. One thing we do need to note for the record for these minutes is that two of you will not be able to approve minutes for one of the items, for the popular item that I will go. Bridget, are you looking at what got posted for the minutes? I don't understand why they would be so long.
I think it's just I thought it was just the 10 or 8 pages of the minutes. I didn't think it was anything else. I'm trying to pull it up, but I haven't.
Okay, I will do. The chair, give us a moment, please. Thank you.
Sure.
And if I had a bum link and it linked me to the wrong thing, of course.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it did. It should have been the minutes. I don't know what happened.
I didn't see the 540 pages in my. Yeah,
Commissioner Ruddick had sent me a couple just spelling error things that I clarified. So
yeah, I see 11 pages here. So I'm in the link that is in front of me now. So it's odd. I must have not refreshed something. I don't know. But anyway, Unless it's absolutely necessary for me, and it sounds like it may be, I should probably ask for the chair's forbearance to quickly read through these few pages, since a quorum will be necessary to approve the minutes. And I apologize for raising what seems to be a spurious concern.
Or Commissioner Gorn.
Spurious, I like that. So I had a question. I wondered if the participation by the city manager should be included in these minutes as an accurate representation of, rather than just saying staff suggested that we deny that project. Seemed important that he was there.
Well, maybe I'll defer to Jill and Winter, but in my experience, it hasn't typically been the case where individual members of city staff have been quoted that way.
That's consistent with my tenure on the Planning Commission.
Okie doke.
Commissioner Benjamin, do you still require a little time to process the minutes?
I'd ask that we alter the agenda just a little bit for me to read a little bit further and maybe pick up another item. I will be splitting my attention. Maybe we could go to staff reports or something that, you know, I defer, but I won't be long. I'm working on it. And I just vote for it if it weren't such an important matter.
Is that amenable to folks? Do we need a vote to defer this to a little later in the agenda, or can we just decide to do that?
Chair Reddick, I think you can, as the chair, just choose to put that, perhaps move the minutes to before the director's report, and we can proceed with the meeting if that's amenable. Okay.
Well, let's continue the approval of minutes until towards the end of tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
That brings us to the opportunity for public comment. Members of the public who are attending are welcome to speak to the commission about any items at all other than those that come later on our agenda tonight. And so if you are in attendance and would like to talk to the commission, please do raise your virtual hand and Bridget will acknowledge you.
I'm seeing none, Commissioner. Chair Reddick. Most of them seem like they're for project based.
All right. Well, in that case, I will not open the public hearing at this point and instead go to the next item on our agenda is the consideration of chair and vice chair elections for the coming year. It's traditional in this commission, as in many similar bodies, to invite the current vice chair to rotate into the chair position. So maybe it'd be smart for me to begin this item by asking Vice Chair Polgar if she would like to speak about her desires in this case.
Thank you, Chair Reddick. So yeah, I did anticipate this, and I actually had thought quite a bit about it, realizing and kind of thinking what I have, frankly, on the horizon for myself, professionally and personally. And I have to be honest, this is just not a good year for me to take on the chair position in addition to everything else. And I want to emphasize that I'm talking about, this is not about being on the Planning Commission, but specifically about taking on the chair role in addition to all the other plates I have spinning, frankly. So I know that's a little perhaps not traditional, but I did want to be, I don't want to take on something that is just not the right time for me to do that. At another time it would be, it's just, this happens to be a bit of a little lot on the horizon, so.
Oh, well, okay. I understand that. I have to admit, I was looking forward to working with you in your capacity as chair this year. I think you do a terrific job, but I certainly understand your desire to not take that on at this point. I wonder, given Vice Chair Polgar's somewhat surprising message to us, might it make sense for the commission to continue this item to our next meeting in order to give all the other commissioners a chance, without the pressure to decide in the next 2 minutes, to give all of the rest of the commissioners a chance to think on what responsibilities they might want to be willing to take up?
From staff, absolutely, Chair Reddick. That is perfectly fine. And as long as you're happy to have the gavel tonight, and always happy to give people more time. This is, we sprung this on you a bit. We were under the impression at the last meeting that in the commission comments that you were thinking about this transition, but I wasn't overt about it in the director's comments. And so I just want to support you, and it's perfectly okay.
Commissioner Hernandez?
If people need more time, I'm supportive of it. Generally, the process is fairly informal, as I've experienced, where people step aside and other folks say, yeah, I'm willing to do it. So the tradition would be, I believe, in terms of who would be up next, with Mr. Gorn, Commissioner Gorn would be the next logical candidate. And so really, I think the question is that something he feels comfortable doing now? Or is it something he feels he would need to defer on? And so I'm okay either way, but I'm certainly supportive of Commissioner Gorn stepping up and becoming the chairman of the commission. And if we need more time, that's okay too. So I just want to express my support for following the general precedent that's gone before.
Well, thank you for that. Let me go to Commissioner Benjamin, who had his hand up next, and then certainly invite Commissioner Gorn to respond to your question.
Yeah, I was going to extend Commissioner Gorn a third option. I would also be supportive of him or Commissioner Hernandez, or if I were asked by other commissioners to do this. I think this is such an important role, and any of us can do a great job. I'm disappointed that it's the wrong time for Sarah, but I hope we get to the point that we'll get to have her industrious work in the chair role. I'd also offer David the option to think about it for a couple of weeks and continue this item to our next meeting. No pressure.
If I can make a quick observation based on my own personal and recent experience, I was very appreciative of the chance to be vice chair under Chair Benjamin for a year before I took on this role a year ago, and that might be another thing for Commissioner Gorn to weigh as a path going forward. Commissioner Hernandez, you have your hand up again.
No, I left it up. So
Commissioner Gorn.
I appreciate all that. I think continuing is a good idea.
I make a motion to continue the item.
Thank you. Commissioner Benjamin has seconded it.
Muted myself. Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Gorn?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Polgar?
Yes.
And Chair Reddick?
Yes.
Motion approved. 5-0.
Thank you. Our first public hearing item on the agenda is application for a coastal development permit for a restoration plan and tree removal at 315 Main Street. And I believe Mr. Scott Phillips will present on this item.
Thank you, Chair Reddick and members of the Planning Commission. Hope everyone had a nice holiday season. Nice to see everyone this evening. I'll give a brief PowerPoint presentation and get your thoughts and ideas on the restoration plan. Screen. Okay, so this slide shows the site and surrounding area. And the subject area where the restoration and tree removals are located is just north of the commercial building at 315 Main Street and south of Pillarcitos Creek, noted in green there. Now the application includes a restoration plan within the riparian buffer area where unpermitted development recently took place. And the red arrows show where ornamental shrubs were planted. Also, various, vegetation removal took place. Weeds, Cape ivy, a little bit of willows, and some other plants. And then some afterwards, mowing and other sort of landscaping activities continued until the work was stopped through a code enforcement case. Now, as mentioned earlier, a couple of tree removals are also included with the proposal. One is after the fact. The picture on the lower left-hand corner shows the pine tree that was removed fairly close to the building footprint. And there's also another tree, an existing tree that's leaning over the building that's causing some concerns, potentially hazardous tree. That tree is also included with the proposal for removal. Now, as far as the restoration plan and replanting, we worked with the project biologist, who is also an arborist, on trying to figure out what the best species is within the riparian buffer. Clearly it needs to be something that's, native and riparian in nature. And they strongly encouraged alder trees to be planted. And, my initial reaction was, well, how about, willow trees? And the answer to that was that this particular area of Pillarcitos Creek already contains quite a bit of willows, and that alder trees would expand the biodiversity as far as trees in the area. Also recommended is adding a native riparian seed mix to the area that was where the vegetation was removed, as well as a lockable gate on the east side of the building itself. There's a little pathway and storage on the side of the building there. And the idea is that would reduce the chances of this type of thing happening in the future. Included with the proposal is biological surveys before the replanting and gate installation, as well as biological monitoring during this work. Now, no mechanized equipment will be needed for the replanting and seeding. Obviously, there's going to need to be some saws and such for installation of the new gate. Now, as far as permits requested, as mentioned, it's a coastal development permit is needed. And noticing took place. We sent out notices to all the neighbors and property owners within 300 feet and posted a notice in the newspaper and posted the site. And I didn't receive any correspondence on the proposal for the restoration and tree removal. Now note the site is within the appeals jurisdiction for the Coastal Commission. So any decision that the Planning Commission makes is appealable to both our City Council as well as the Coastal Commission. Now, a couple of things for the Commission to consider. Our local coastal program, several policies within the land use plan itself are referenced in Exhibit A that encourage restoration activities within riparian buffers. Also, our zoning code within the Coastal Resource Conservation chapter, it's identified that restoration of native vegetation is an allowed use within riparian buffers. So we're pretty happy about that. As far as the California Environmental Quality Act, an exemption seems appropriate since, restoration without any mechanized equipment, 2 trees with biosurveying and monitoring, it seems to be a good fit. So that's about all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions. We recommend that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing on this item since it is in the appeals jurisdiction, and then Planning Commission deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And Commissioner Benjamin, a clarifying question?
Yes, a clarifying question. Thank you, Chair. So good evening, Scott. I'm wondering about the, it looks to me like we're in the bed. We're not in the, we're within the banks of the channel. We're not actually in the wetted channel. And I understood the biologist's analysis with respect to development in the, in that area. But I was a little surprised that a 401 permit wasn't required. Could you just remind me why the Water Quality Control Board wouldn't be concerned about this, since it, a change in vegetation in the area could have sediment implications?
Yes, absolutely. So we did send the restoration plan to the California State Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers and of course the Coastal Commission. And we only received an email from coastal staff, but nothing from the Army Corps or U.S. Fish and Wildlife or State Fish and Wildlife. But normally they request a 404 permit, like you mentioned, if there's work that takes place within the creek banks, and no changes within the creek banks are proposed or recommended within the restoration plan. So that's why that wouldn't be required. So,
and I'm clear on the 404. What I was asking was actually about the 401. Was the Regional Water Quality Control Board also a recipient? And if so, did they have any comments?
Yes, we did send it to them, and we did not receive any comments.
I see. Okay. I visited the site on Sunday, and I was struck by how wet it was and how little vegetation was on the bank. SWCA didn't speak to the stability of the bank. Do you have insight into that, perhaps from other work that's been done, say, on the Main Street Bridge or other ways that we might understand whether that bank is stable and what impact, if any, the vegetation changes might have had? I'm not suggesting that I know. I just feel like that's part of the record.
Yeah, and my guess is that the large rainstorm that we had last month probably scoured the sides of the bank a bit, and that's probably what you noticed. Eric Schickenberg is actually also logged in this evening. He's the project biologist and he's an arborist. And he might be better equipped to provide feedback on that question.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That was the only question I had.
Thank you. Commissioner Hernandez? Did you have a clarifying question?
I do. There are 2 projects in front of us, and I just want to understand for the public who are watching at home and maybe myself, why we're looking at these as 2 separate items versus a single item. That's the first question. The second question is, I notice there's irrigation being removed from the project. So I'm assuming that irrigation was existing before the applicant did their minor work on the project, but would like clarification on that. And I noticed, third question, in the staff report that says that there was communication with Coastal Commission staff who confirmed the 1-to-1 mitigation ratio, but the written correspondence with Coastal Commission staff looks like they're calling for 3-to-1 mitigation. So we'd just like clarification on all three of those points, please.
Yes, absolutely. And in regard to your first question, I actually had the same question when we were confronted by these two proposals. Why don't we combine the two? And the reason why we didn't is that with the parklet proposal, there are two businesses associated with that proposal. One is Fattoria Mari, which is the Italian restaurant, and then the second is Barterra, the wine tasting bar. And Barterra had nothing to do with the restoration of the landscaping work that took place in the creek area. So it doesn't make sense to get them involved with this one.
Very good, thank you.
So that was the primary reason. Now, as far as your second question regarding the irrigation, to my knowledge, that was left over from the previous restaurant owner, and it's minor. Frankly, it's hard to find. I don't think it's much, but it's a little bit of drip irrigation. Okay. So, and then your third question, remind me again.
The staff report indicates that there's a your communication with Coastal Commission staff confirmed that a 1-to-1 mitigation ratio for the restoration work would make sense. But the written correspondence we see in the agenda here actually doesn't include that. It actually has the last correspondence we see in the written communication is asking why wouldn't we use the 3-to-1 mitigation ratio. So just trying to clarify that point.
Yes, and we received the email after the restoration plan was sent to the Coastal Commission. We forwarded that to the project biologist for feedback to get a sense of what made them, what they thought about this. And they brought up the point that the impacts were temporary of the landscaping that took place, and that the subset G within the policy was more appropriate since it was temporary. And G does call out a 1-to-1 ratio when there are mitigations that are temporary. So we went back to coastal staff and asked them that, what do you guys think? Our project biologist is saying that 1-to-1 is more appropriate. And they agreed. They actually sent me correspondence via email that they were in agreement with that. So
just as a point of order, it would be great if we could include that correspondence in this, because it creates a more full record of the communication. I just would hate for somebody to misinterpret or think we're doing favors for an owner and brushing over Coastal Commission communications.
Well, Commissioner Hernandez, I know that I did see that email that Scott's talking about in the packet.
I must have missed it. I saw the email, but I didn't see the agreement from Coastal Commission staff that 1-to-1 made sense.
It is there. I did read it.
Okay, I'll go back and look. Maybe the curse of Jimmy Benjamin's affecting me as well.
Yeah, actually, I just double checked, and Chair Ruddock is correct. I had forgotten that I included that in the attachment, but the email received on January 4th does confirm that the 1-to-1 ratio is appropriate.
I typed that in for you. Yeah, it's there. Okay.
Vice Chair Polgar. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I had a question about in terms of following up after plantings. I wanted to make sure, and I might have missed it, what the requirement would be to kind of show that the alders are surviving and that the seeding is actually growing, because I do think that I understand that the biologist who is also a tree specialist would definitely be able to address that. But I think that part of the point of the restoration, or a key factor in the restoration is partly because we want to make sure that the area remains vegetated appropriately, right? And to avoid an issue where you get erosion, bare ground, and starting of erosion, things like that. And so I just want to make sure that that's part of this, particularly just because it was a site where they did this work that kind of changed it, and now we're putting it back. And I realize it's I understand the one-to-one, the temporary and stuff, but I want to make sure that the impacts are truly temporary, and that it does that the alders and the other mechanism or the other plantings actually take hold. And so I wasn't sure about that component in what we're approving.
So the draft condition of approval A5 includes follow-up monitoring, and what we thought might be appropriate would be an annual follow-up for 2 years, just to double check and make sure that the plants are established. Now, if the commission feels that maybe a longer term follow-up would be more appropriate, that we'd be happy to modify the condition of approval. So
I completely missed that. I swear I read and looked through, I just missed it. So thank you for pointing that out.
Certainly.
Apparently it's a night for missing things. So I overlooked the final communication from the Coastal Commission staff, read right past it and went on to the next email. So thanks.
No harm done. Scott, were you thinking it would be helpful to invite the biologist to respond to one of Commissioner Benjamin's questions?
Yes. Before he does, perhaps I could frame the question with a little additional context.
Please.
In the report, it sounded to me like there was some willow, some understory vegetation. It was hard for me to tell the nature of the disturbance, but and I understand about the tree replacement. I wasn't clear on the understory or the under canopy kind of suggestions that are being proposed. And I thank Commissioner Vice Chair Polgar for bringing up a question that seems to have become my brand. I was going to ask whether the monitoring would go beyond the tree establishment and go to bank stability. Thank you.
If you would like me to weigh in on that, I'm happy to.
Yeah, please go ahead.
As far as bank stability is concerned, the bank in that area is actually, the topography there is pretty gradual. And the existing vegetation has, since the time of my site visit, has reestablished itself. There, as we all know, in the creeks here on the coast, we have our suite of native riparian species, but we also often have other kind of non-native invasive species like Cape ivy, garden nasturtium, et cetera. The vegetation recruitment in that area was pretty rapid and comprehensive through the whole area where there was those plantings installed. I do not think there's any issue with bank stability in this area, given the gradual kind of transition from the below top of bank into the sort of yard of 315 Main Street, the little area there, the garden area. And the removal of those planted ornamental fruit trees and such really would result in quite minimal amount of ground disturbance. And, through the use of a native seed mix, I think there's very little likelihood of any bank stability issues resulting from the restoration work or even the initial landscaping activities that occurred there. Hopefully that answers your question.
let me just frame it a little bit more. And thank you for the answer. I appreciate that. So I understand if I think about the bank above where the vegetation changes took place, that the impact is minimal. That I gather is gradually sloped. If I go from that location out and go into the area where it descends into the wetted channel, that's quite steep. And that is where the roots of the changed vegetation could or wouldn't have an impact. It was the impact on that lower channel that was the subject of my question. Does that help?
Yeah, the lower channel, I think in that area immediately adjacent to the new landscape plantings that were installed, it is actually not that steep. Arguably, like, we do a mapping of top of bank and ordinary high water mark all the time. And sometimes, there are certain indicators that allow us to map or determine where those boundaries are. So that work definitely occurred outside and above the top of bank. And so, we were definitely, really close to or just within the riparian canopy, which is California Department of Fish and Wildlife jurisdiction. So there was no impacts below top of bank from this work, and the restoration work would not result in any impacts below top of bank. Maybe hopefully I've understood your question correctly.
I'm just going to go have another look at my pictures. Thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you for forbearance.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Yes. So I have a penchant for walking around the city, and I have a long memory. So when I look at the project site, and I'm looking at page 38 of the page 6 of the SWCA Environmental Consultants Report and page 38 of our packet, I'm looking at the edge of the riparian vegetation, the green and the green line, which is imposed on the red dotted line. And then I'm looking at the 50-foot riparian setback. Now, my long memory indicates that there is a grassy, like a lawn, if you will, inside of this red area, this irregular shaped red area. And over the years, various events may have been held there, like weddings or other kind of get-togethers on a special occasion. Can you comment about what can and cannot happen inside the red dotted line, the red irregular shape?
Yes,
Scott, would you like me to handle that, or do you want to take that? Sorry.
No, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, we're basically bound to the allowed uses that are identified within riparian buffer areas. And fortunately, one of the allowed uses, as I mentioned, is restoration of native plants. So this proposal is consistent with the allowed uses. Moving forward, if we don't see that there was ever a coastal development permit issued that would allow for events like maybe you've seen in the past, Commissioner Hernandez. It's if they, in the future, if a business owner decided to do the same thing, have a wedding there, then they would be subject to code enforcement similar to what took place with the vegetation removal.
So as appealing as that location might be for various reasons, hosting events there and using it as a more general extension of the restaurant is not something that would be allowed without a CDP.
Yes, that's correct. And it's not to say that couldn't be issued in the future, but we may be looking at, mitigation, coming up with, mitigation offset for loss in riparian or other creative solutions like that that possibly could allow that type of use to take place there. But that's really not part of what's included with the proposal this evening.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So.
Are there further clarifying questions? seeing none, I will be prepared to open the public hearing if members of the public who are in attendance wish to comment on this application. We'll need Bridget to tell us if we have any speakers.
Doesn't look like it. Nobody's raising their hand.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
All right, then. In that case, if we've given everybody enough time to consider whether they want to address, let's go to Commissioner deliberation. I'll call on Commissioner Benjamin to start, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the answers from staff and our consultant. I will confess, when I read through the language, the definition of bed and bank is kind of vague. There's, you know, in the Coastal Act, you have an area that starts at a fairly high level and then it drops in. And by that definition, this area where the work took place seems to be well within the riparian corridor rather than merely within the riparian corridor buffer zone. So I'd beg to differ in that analysis. On the other hand, I'm not sure that I think it's material to this particular application. When I just looked through my pictures again, and perhaps because I came at a later time, maybe after the storm, as Scott had suggested. You know, when I got to the edge of what dropped down into the wetted channel, you know, it was quite steep. I mean, it was steep, and it was bare, and perhaps the vegetation will recruit onto that surface instead of slumping, and that would be wonderful. I think it's worth monitoring that independently or in addition to the health of the trees that are being planted and the health of the understory vegetation, which seems to be self-recruiting. So I think that's, you know, the suggested proposals make sense. I would just say that I think that we need to be watching this for a longer term, because stream dynamics don't necessarily happen as quickly as the changes that we make. You know, little changes in the stream can impart a force on the dynamic system that can happen over a much longer period. And I'm not sure that 2 years is adequate to understand that impact. So I'd suggest 5 years at a minimum.
Good points. Other commissioners wish to deliberate and speak? Vice Chair Polgar.
I'd just like to kind of tack on to Commissioner Benjamin's comments. And I think that keeping tabs on what's happening with the channel, I realize that we're not talking about in the channel here, but just by virtue of where it is, it would not be a good site to have any kind of channel incision, because once a channel starts to unravel, it really goes. And so I think just the aspect of this is, yes, there's the vegetation, and I definitely understand what the biologist was speaking to about the slope, et cetera. It doesn't look, that steep, but I do think that just because of the location of it, and it would be an important site not to. I think it could be worthwhile to make sure that it's looked at more than just 2 years, and make sure that the vegetation persists, and that I realize that their role in this is around vegetation. But I do think because there were the actions were kind of changing the riparian area, in a sense, they put themselves in a position of changing that part of the creek riparian area. And I think it's worthwhile to say, hey, listen, you got to keep tabs on that and make sure that's not, and recognize what might be happening alongside it. I don't have a very clear way of like putting that into our language, but I think that it's a dicey area in my opinion, and these changes, this is an area I wouldn't want to see it devolve. So that's my thought. I didn't, the only other thing that I just wanted to, I actually should have asked this as a clarifying question. One of the things that I've heard multiple times, Scott, you mentioned that there was no mechanized equipment and everything. I guess maybe I'd assumed that chainsaws would be needed to get rid of the big tree that's leaning over the building.
Yes, that's correct. But now the tree that's leaning over the building, the trunk itself is outside of the riparian buffer. But
okay.
You are correct that they will need a chainsaw to remove the tree. So
and just to clarify, there's a picture in the staff report and there's a picture in that you showed in the presentation. And obviously there were actually two trees, or it looked like there were two trees, but there was one that was very obviously leaning over the building. I'm assuming it's just that tree. It's not the other one that was kind of further towards the creek.
you are correct. It's the concern is with the tree that's leaning over the building. Apparently the restaurant owner had difficulty acquiring insurance because of the tree. So there are other ramifications there. I know the property owner is concerned, and we've had the arborist weigh in saying that the tree does need to be removed. So they are, there is a one-to-one tree replacement requirement in our heritage tree ordinance. So they would be replaced with the alders. So.
Okay.
Thank you both.
I will say that other than the issue that I kind of piled on with Commissioner Benjamin, I think that I like, for instance, that the project includes the locked gate with a sign saying that no, I think that will help make it clear that this is not an area that's meant to be for events and things like that, and make that kind of more of a publicly recognized barrier. Those were that was really all I had in terms of comments.
Thanks. Commissioner Gorn.
Hey there. First of all, I just wanted to say it's when people start to change the landscape, it's hard to catch it right away. So I really appreciate the city catching it at the start when only one tree was cut down. To me, this, the restoration plan seems really clear. The one concern that I had was, I don't know what alder roots do. I don't know if they go down or if they go across. And I'm not sure if that's what Commissioner Benjamin's concern is, that those roots may somehow disrupt the bank, or if it would reinforce it. It probably would reinforce it. But that was my only real question. And then I did wonder, this whole process is because of this, these changes that were made that go against code. Is there any other punishment for cutting down those trees to begin with, that tree, and trying to change the landscaping in the riparian corridor? I guess it's not really a planning commission question, but I did wonder about it.
Yeah, it is a question that occurs. Why don't we continue with commissioner deliberation, and then maybe staff can summarize any responses to such points. Commissioner Hernandez.
So I largely echo the comments of Commissioner Benjamin and Vice Chair Polgar. When you change the habitat in a riparian zone of that is CDP, then there are ramifications to that, and it may involve costs, it may involve penalties, there may be problems that you have to deal with. And I think it's important for the development community here to recognize that. Certainly when we bought property in Half Moon Bay many, many years ago, that was a major consideration for where we bought property. We wanted to be very, very cautious around anything involving a riparian zone. So I think it's important. On the other hand, tying monitoring to an individual project, as we're wont to do on this commission, is a bit of a bugaboo for the city because it's hard to maintain, it's hard to track. We've put all kinds of very specific projects or requirements in the past, and sometimes I wonder if that's an undue burden. So I think given all of the development that's happening in this area, I wonder, and this maybe is a clarifying question for the city, but it's also for this commission. I wonder if it makes more sense to just have this general area be an area that we're monitoring. There's a Main Street Bridge project. There's other foreseeable projects in our land use plan. I just wonder if maybe we take the burden of monitoring this little sliver of land out of this CDP and maybe punt to the city for a larger, just something that's actually manageable because it's tied to the Main Street Bridge Initiative and all the work that's going to be happening there. And, the protection of the bridge and the historical view of the bridge is probably going to have a much bigger impact and a much longer term impact on that area than, somebody going around there with a lawnmower and a chainsaw. So I'm just curious what the city's thoughts are on that.
Interesting point. It's also quite close to the Carter Park site, isn't it? Commissioner Benjamin.
I'm happy to speak, but you haven't taken your own turn, Chair Ruddick. If you want, I'll be glad to hold back and hear your thoughts.
No, I defer to your wisdom in this at this point in time.
Oh, very well. So I just wanted to respond to Rick's suggestion. I agree that looking at one tiny segment of a large riparian corridor is inadequate to understand the dynamics. That said, the impacts of sheet flow would be evident in this area. If there was a significant amount of runoff in the area or the root structures of the plants that are proposed. And parenthetically, I'll say I have no idea whether the alders will produce a more robust bank and hold the soil better than willows or not. Biodiversity seems like a good goal. Stability seems like a good goal. I hope they're not mutually exclusive. And I know enough to know that I don't know the answer. But I also believe that it's important for us to monitor that because changes in that bank that are associated with slumping in that area, unless there's been significant changes in the velocity of water or, the amount of, the load of sediment that it's carrying has dropped in a way that would erode off a lot and stimulate slumping from the bottom. It needs to be monitored in this location, and it potentially needs to be repaired in this location, which is not to say that it's going to happen, is to say that we should watch. And I will just say I'm fine with the tree removal that's been proposed. I do see that it's leaning precariously into the corner of that building. I believe that we ought to have, if I missed it, I apologize. We ought to have conditions that allow the nutrients of that tree. It should be staked to the bank and kept in the area rather than pulped and removed or chipped and removed in some way. And since the roots of that willow are actually within the bank, broadly speaking, from the upper level of this area, no one dug a hole and said, I know, let's put a 2-story building down there. The banks of Palacios Creek are closer to the street level, not to the level of above the wetted channel. I am floored by the idea that it would not be considered within the riparian area.
Let's go to Commissioner Gorn, please. Commissioner Gorn?
Thank you. So I appreciate the sort of the broader view idea to look at the banks and the creek in a more holistic way. I would say, given the temptation to use that area, I think it's probably a good idea for the owner of that spot to do the monitoring. I think that's a good reminder that this is a sensitive habitat and needs to be respected that way. Thanks.
I'd like to echo something Commissioner Gorn said just a few minutes ago, that kudos to the city for the code enforcement that stopped this before it went further than it did. It's disappointing that property owner who's been in place so close to the riparian corridor for so long, that this could happen with such a property. It seems to me that these incidents happen, these unpermitted development efforts happen. I don't have the statistics, but it feels to me like they happen more than one would like. And this is a bit tangential to tonight's decision, but I would enjoy learning if staff has any feeling about educational efforts to property owners who border sensitive riparian areas in the city. My guess is that these things happen, these incidents happen the big majority of time out of ignorance rather than malignant intent, although probably not 100% of the time. But I won't derail us further about this, but it would be interesting to know if some proactive outreach to property owners might cut down on the incidents that spring out of ignorance. Other than that, I think that this is the right remedy for this situation. I think we should be thankful that the damage wasn't greater than it was, and I'm persuaded by Commissioners Benjamin and Gorn's remarks about extended monitoring as a responsibility of the property owner. So I would support a condition like that. Other comments, or do we want to invite staff to see if staff has any responses? Well, Jill, Jill and Scott, do you have any comments on the deliberations?
Scott may have.
Yes.
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, maybe I'll start us out, and then anything I missed, Jill, maybe you could back me up. I'll start out with the monitoring, and we'd be happy to modify the condition of approval to 5 years and identify the property owner as responsible for the monitoring, if the commission feels that that would be more appropriate. As far as the tree trimmings left on site, I think it would make sense to add an additional condition of approval requiring that to take place. Let's see, as far as penalties for cutting down trees without the benefit of a tree removal permit, our normal practice, if we have someone that removed a tree without a tree permit and they don't work with us and aren't responsive, then we normally don't implement administrative citations. I think it's the city's practice to leave that for the folks that are not responsive and difficult to work with as a sort of a second step, so to speak. And then alder root characteristics, I think Mr. Schickenberger would probably be the best to answer that question.
I'm sorry, I moved him earlier back over, so hold on, Eric. He's coming over right now.
Well, he's coming over. I will note that there are alders in the area. This is not an introduction. There are quite a few alders right next to the Main Street Bridge.
You're on mute, Eric.
double muted. My bad. So with regard to alder roots versus willow roots, it is my professional opinion that the bank has a network of roots already in place there from the existing riparian, vegetation. There's a lot of, interconnectivity in the rhizosphere there. To add, one species or another is not really going to result in a change of the, erosion or bank stability there. It's all, those willow roots are all throughout that. They're looking for water wherever they can find it. And ultimately, I don't think there's going to be a difference between alder and or willow trees as far as planting in there. And I think, initially our opinion was the biodiversity was important, and that alders will, they're found in that drainage. They're found in Pillarcitos Creek, and it would, improve the overall quality of that habitat.
Thank you.
And through the chair, if you don't have anything else for the biologist at this point, I just wanted to add on to Scott's response regarding code enforcement and penalties. Scott honed in on trees that are removed without benefit of permit. I
don't think we have anything else for Mr. Schickenberg,
okay.
Jill, but let me give commissioners a chance to be clear about that. Okay.
Wait, does he have his hand raised though? Was there a following up? I don't know, Commissioner.
I do.
Sorry, Chair Reddick, I didn't add it through the chair.
Oh, good save. Go ahead, Eric.
So one of the things I would like to mention with regard to the if we did remove that one tree, that the ornamental tree that's leaning over the building, that is a willow species. In my professional opinion, it is an ornamental willow species that was planted at some time in the past. There's a number of trees, I believe 7 or so there, that are all of the same species and size, and planted in a nice, neat row against the southeastern abutment of the Main Street Bridge. I'm uncertain as to the exact species of willow that is. Something to consider when talking about willows is they are very easy to re-sprout. Oftentimes in restoration, we'll just take like a willow stick and put it in the dirt and it will grow. My concern with leaving that willow on site is that if it is indeed not a native willow that's found in our watershed, that it could potentially start sprouting and or bring in a non-native species into that riparian area. Something that could be figured out at a later date, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that maybe putting a non-native willow there might not be the best approach.
Thank you for pointing that out. Commissioner Benjamin.
Yeah, my understanding is that we have the Pacific willow and the arroyo willow as our native willows. And if that's a non-native willow, Mr. Schickenberger is on the money, and it makes sense. I will say that unless we took steps to remove the root, which I will strongly oppose because of the stability to bank ramifications, it's likely to come back anyway, unless it's deprived of water. But I appreciate the concern, and I would just say, through the monitoring process, I am quite neutral as to whether we have willows or alders. Native species are good. Returning the nutrients to the soil is good. Not having a removal of something that would constitute some kind of, could be interpreted as dredge spoils that would trigger a 404 is very good. And I think that's not going to happen in this case because we're out of the wetted channel. So I appreciate the additional clarification. If it's a Pacific willow or an arroyo willow, I think it probably belongs there. Thank you.
Jill, thank you for your patience.
Of course. No, that was, I'm glad that we learned about that. We really enjoy working with Eric, so thank you.
Thank you.
So speaking of which, so that it's really relevant to how this particular case was evaluated Normally we, as Scott was describing, if we have an applicant, or what I call them as, they're surprised to be an applicant, someone who has removed a tree, didn't realize they needed a permit, and we get to invite them in to become an applicant to get that permit after the fact. And when that process typically goes really well, I see that as voluntary compliance. It is not in anyone's best interest to move into some kind of administrative citation process or anything like that. We're moving on, and we can correct the situation. In this case, I deferred a decision about that because it's so important. It's Pelarcitos Creek. It's a buffer. It's all the things you discussed tonight about bank stability and habitat and just the really high value of this particular area. So we waited for the analysis that was provided in the biological report to ensure that to our mind at this point, it appears that there is no permanent damage. Now, we do have monitoring as part of the condition of this permit. And you're discussing the obligations associated with that. If the result of that had been different, note that this wouldn't qualify for one-to-one mitigation. This per your LCP and the Coastal Commission's own review of this, we would have from the get-go started in the 3-to-1 mitigation category. So there are defined penalties of different sorts for different kinds of actions. And in this case, fortunately, the work that was done was quite limited, and we caught it quickly, and they stopped, and they've spent a lot of money on preparing a restoration plan, and they're going to spend money putting it in. So I think you have a lot of cooperation here, some good luck, and a lot of people are taking this seriously, and we really do appreciate the owner and the new business owner as well, who we tried to communicate about this, but they've learned a lot about their new location here in Half Moon Bay.
Thank you for that context. Are commissioners in the mood for a motion on this item? Commissioner Benjamin?
Thank you. Yeah, I will just, first I'll say I did speak briefly with the business owner when I stopped by. I found him affable, anxious to come into conformance. It left me with the feeling that this was a very cooperative applicant. And I appreciated his candor and his openness. Not that that's particularly material to the CDP, but it reinforces what I think staff's observations were earlier. I move the resolution next in order with the changes that were suggested by Scott, with the clarification that the monitoring be extended for 5 years, that it include the bank stability, not just the revegetation, that the willow be identified, and if it turns out to be a native species, that it be staked to the bank and allowed to rot or restore as appropriate. And let's see, Commissioner Hernandez had another change. That's my motion, and I'm open to modifications.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I think the question I had was addressed by Scott's comments, which is the monitoring, and city staff said they were fine doing a 5-year monitoring. I would defer to my fellow commissioners on and actually city staff about the what exactly is being monitored. So I would just like a little clarification before we vote on the motion. I'd just like a clarification that Commissioner Benjamin's summation of city staff's position on what needs to be monitored is accurate.
So I'll clarify my motion. I wasn't necessarily, if the bank is fine, I'm not worried about it. If the bank is showing signs of failing, even if the vegetation is great, I'm worried about it. And that's what I want to watch as well as the veg. I defer to staff as to whether they think that's a good idea.
Well, as a
Do
point
you
of
need a
order,
second
yes,
for us to be able to discuss it? Okay, well, I will second Commissioner Benjamin's motion. And I am also interested in knowing the answer to that question.
So Scott, is it fair to ask you what that means? What that
yes.
means
So
to you
the
exactly?
monitoring, absolutely. Monitoring would include, verifying that the plantings that were put in place are thriving, and that the bank is stable. And if need be, we would get the project biologist involved to provide feedback. So.
And I mean, when I am required to monitor for my projects, it's photo monitoring usually. That's what I'm assuming you're talking about, like photographing, having established
yes.
photo monitoring points that you're taking the same photo each year, so that
yes,
you get a picture
and archiving it in the project folder. So.
Okay. That's what I had been anticipating was like a reasonable approach for this kind of monitoring. Is that what you do?
Yes, that's absolutely. And that's our normal practice with all tree removal permits. We do require that folks provide us with, photographic evidence that the trees have been planted and that they're thriving. So.
Thank you for that. Further discussion?
I just had to pardon my ignorance here, but just in the past, we've had a real hard time coming up with records and things that were discussed in the past and things that were supposed to be filed. The city's new record keeping system, you have project files that are maintained. You have a way of actually doing this today. It's not something you're going to have to do on an ad hoc basis. Is that a fair way of describing the city's current IT infrastructure and ability to store projects on a long-term basis?
Yes, absolutely. We do have an archiving system set in place. Maybe not as sophisticated as San Jose, for example, or something like that, but it's we do have a way of keeping track of monitoring. So
great, excellent.
Well, if there's no further discussion on Commissioner Benjamin's motion, let's have a roll call.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Polgar?
Yes.
And Chair Reddick?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, everybody. Next item on our agenda is a coastal development permit for parklet and fire riser at the same address, 315 Main Street. And Scott, we turn to you again for enlightenment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This is a kind of a unique proposal, actually, to be in front of the Planning Commission, in that it's entirely within the public right-of-way out in front of 315 Main Street, the same address as the restoration plan. And I'll give a brief PowerPoint presentation to kind of show the commission what's going on. Okay, so not only is it a parklet, but they'd like to slightly modify the exterior of the building. So I'll just start out by giving a little bit of background information. Folks from the public may not be aware of exactly what a parklet is. They've become more common during the pandemic. Probably see them around in other communities. but just a general definition, a parklet is a small seating area or green space along the edge of a sidewalk that is typically created within roadways or parking spaces. This slide, I just popped in a few sort of examples here. The one on the left is actually within angled parking spaces out in the Sunset District of San Francisco. I thought that might be appropriate since 331 Main Street also has angled parking. And then the one on the lower right-hand corner is within Coal Valley out in San Francisco as well, but includes, the expanded restaurant use. So the French restaurant there is utilizing the parklet for dining space, similar to what's being proposed tonight. Now, another unique thing is that the applicant is Ed Love, a local architect, but the owners of the project are the two business owners, Vittoria Imari and Bartera, which they would be funding and maintaining the new parklet. The new parklet includes boardwalks, planter boxes around the edge, landscaping, tables, chairs, string lighting. All would be located within 5 angled parking spaces as shown with the barricades currently. Now, total area of the parklet would be about 1,000 square feet. And the tallest portion would be the planters as well as the posts for the string lighting. Screening of the fire riser on the outside of the building is also included. And the idea is that, maybe there would be a little bit of leftover lumber from the parklet that could be included with a decorative screening of the fire riser that was recently installed. Now, a little background, the parklet design was presented to the Architectural Advisory Committee on October 21st of last year. And the AAC, they were very supportive of the design and materials, but suggested a few minor little things as far as construction and a little change with the fire riser screening. And the applicant quickly made the changes that the AAC requested. And that's when we scheduled the Planning Commission meeting for tonight. And then the design was also thoroughly reviewed by the city engineer. And Jonathan Wu is also logged in this evening. As far as permits requested, a coastal development permit is needed, as well as architectural review. And we actually sent notices to the same folks that received the notice for the restoration plan, separate notice, but at the same time, posted the site and then also published a notice in the newspaper. No inquiries or feedback from business owners or property owners were received through the whole noticing or AAC meeting. Now, similar to the restoration plan, this would be appealable to the California Coastal Commission. So any decision by the Planning Commission could be appealed to the City Council and then on to the Coastal Commission. So just so you know about that. Now here's a similar aerial photograph. Obviously the parklet would be out front of the existing building, just south of the Main Street Bridge. Now this slide shows the proposed site plan with the new parklet improvements as well as fire riser. And notice that there is a new bike rack that would be installed in sort of the excess area of the 5th parking space on the south side. 45 feet of the north side of the parklet would be modular in a sense. And the reason why that's required is that Public Works in particular, we want to make sure that there's plenty of room for any bridge improvements that take place in the future. So that would be written into the license agreement and is included in the conditions of approval. There's also a sort of an aisle, a 5-foot wide aisle that the fire district required in order to maintain access to the fire riser. The fire riser screening that's included in the proposal tonight has been reviewed by the fire district and water district, and they are okay with this change. There is one sensor that will need to be mounted to the outside, and the fire riser screening would need to be open or openable. And then a little bit more zoomed in, this includes the lighting for the new parklet, which would be strung from posts, the string lighting. A section of the parklet, you'll notice that the parklet is angled to follow the crown of the roadway. And this allows for a flat surface to meet ADA accessibility. Now, another thing that of note on the section, the posts for the lights, one request that the AAC had was to not extend the posts all the way into the gutter, the drainage gutter. And so that was modified. And the idea is that we want to maintain the water flows within the gutter itself underneath the parklet. And then here's a sort of a zoomed in view of the fire riser. You'll notice that both the business owners will have space on the fire riser screening to include a menu board, which might be a nice decorative addition. And then notice the rounded copper cap on this fire riser screening. That's another suggestion that the AAC had. They asked that the cap of the fire riser match the downspout and be rounded. They thought that would be more integral to the existing building. And so that change was made also. Now here's a rendering of the proposed parklet. Quite a bit different than what you see out there currently. Here, I'll flip it back. So this is what the site looks like today. And then here's the proposed parklet. And then at night, this is kind of what it would look like. And then a few things for the commission to consider. The site is within a visual resource area, and so the visual resource standards are applicable. And we included the findings for scenic corridor standards for downtown within the resolution. Let's see, as far as the downtown specific plan, landscaping is included with the parklet, which is called out in the specific plan. And the parklet doesn't take up all the parking within this block of Main Street, which as you read through the specific plan, it does talk a lot about parking and maintaining some parking within downtown. So we feel that the parklet proposal is in compliance with that. And then also the street trees within this area would be maintained, even with the installation of the parklet. As far as CEQA, we feel an exemption would be appropriate since the parklet is accessory to the main building and within the developed roadway. And for all intents and purposes is temporary. You know, the license agreement would allow the city to ask for the parklet to be removed if need be, or if, something came up. So the city will still have that, the ability to ask for that. As far as next steps, as I mentioned, after the CDP is approved, then a license agreement would need to be reviewed by our city council before the parklet could be installed. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also have Jonathan Wu from Public Works and Engineering. If you have any questions about public right-of-way improvements or how the parklet would affect all the great stuff that Public Works has going on. So.
Well, thank you, Scott. Clarifying question from Commissioner Hernandez.
Hey, Scott, thank you for the great presentation. So a couple of questions. The first one is, if I look at the amount of space occupied by the current parklet in front of these 315 Main Street, the protections go effectively all the way to the edge of the bridge. And in the design proposed here, it looks like there's about 4 feet of space that's left between the edge of where the landscaping stops. And if you follow all the way to the edge of the bridge, where the sidewalk of the bridge sort of bends and goes perpendicular. What's the thinking behind that 4-foot gap? Is it a safety issue? Is it an aesthetic issue? What's going on there?
Yes, the idea is to provide a little bit of separation between the vehicle travel, and the parklet itself. So. And I understand what you're saying, that where the barricades are currently out on the street are actually further out than where the parklet's proposed. Right?
If there's a legitimate public safety concern, I think it's always good to be mindful of that. But if it's really more of, I don't know, it just seems like if you're going to take away the parking, take away all the parking and make maximum use of the space. But, Ed Love's way more skilled at this than I, and I'm sure there's other considerations they have. So that was really the nature of the question, and maybe the applicant can speak to that unless you have other comments on it. The second question is, we've gone through great pains to protect, we're going through great pains to protect Main Street Bridge for its historical significance. But I noticed the style of the fencing around the landscaping is very different and very distinct from that of the fencing that goes around the bridge. And I'm wondering if the Architectural Review Committee had an opinion as to whether or not that worked, or they thought it was good, they thought it didn't need to be consistent. Was there a strong opinion around that, or no opinion expressed?
Well, I think at the Architectural Advisory Committee, there were some questions about the portion of the park that would be removed before any future improvements to the Main Street Bridge. So, and the idea is, what was discussed was that once future improvements to the Main Street Bridge are done, that the parklet could be expanded again to sort of integrate with the bridge improvements. So it's a little hypothetical at this point, because we're not really sure what improvements will take place with the bridge. So,
they had no concern about the pink horizontal slats versus the vertical white slats and the distinction in sizes. And they thought in the Architectural Reviews Committee, this was a harmonious design that fits into the building and is a perfectly reasonable thing to do in this location.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, Scott, there were a couple of things that were interesting to me about this project. In reading the Architectural Advisory Committee's review, there was a brief conversation about the parklet's use for the businesses that are adjacent, as opposed to the public benefit of the parklet. And I wonder if you could just give me, give the commission a short summary of how you anticipate the public to be using it, or in particular, if they'd be using it if they weren't customers of one of the two restaurants.
Yes, absolutely. And with this, it's a little bit of a balancing act, because of course, public right of way needs to be open to the public. At the same time, we have a a restaurant that intends to program the seating for reservations and dedicate that to customers during lunch and dinner hours. So we want to be mindful of, his investment, return on investment for the parklet. So the idea was that the parklet would be open to the public, anyone from the public during non-lunch and dinner hours. For example, in the morning, it could be open to the public, but then during the lunch and dinner, when the restaurant is open, then that it would be dedicated to seating. So,
forgive me if was that actually described in the permit conditions, the hours in which it was available to the public, or is that still...
Not specifically, but that will be in the license agreement. So,
okay, and then just one other question. I can't say I was upset, but I noted that you said this was appealable to the Coastal Commission, and that is because of proximity to
the Pilarcitos Creek.
The creek. So, okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Vice Chair Polgar.
Thank you. So I had a clarifying question about, I was looking in the plans. I wanted to make sure that I understood the proposed placement of some of the tables outside of Barterra, because it looked to me like they were being put on the sidewalk. And I think that's in the renderings as well. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe Barterra already has one or two tables that are placed out on the sidewalk occasionally. So, but this would, actually allow them to do that. So.
Sorry, that was it.
Commissioner Hernandez.
I didn't mean to leave it hanging.
In the design, you've left the yellow striping on the ground. Is it the intention to leave that there permanently, or are you going to go in with like a power washer and take it out, or are you going to, maybe put a rumble strip over there or some other type of indication that this is not a parking spot, or is there something else you're going to do with that, or are you just going to leave the ugly yellow lines there? Because it kind of seems like a inappropriate design if you left it there.
So the yellow line where? Yellow line.
So on the parklet, you've got the remnants of, if I look at the photo, if I go to Fattoria and Mari today, there's white lines that are there. And in the design documents we see in front of us, the sort of angled parking lines that are on the asphalt, they're left in the drawings as these sort of bright yellow lines, which is, a little distracting and also indicates the temporary nature of this location. Is it the intention to remove the striping on the street and just pave it over with asphalt, or put something else there?
And the rendering I think isn't entirely accurate. I believe the stripes are white, and those would remain in place. And the idea is that we want to be able to, if Public Works decides that it's necessary for the parklet to be removed, then the parking would be reestablished. So
I guess the question I have is, if the concern is about, creating a little separation, a little public space, one of the things I've seen in places like San Francisco and Palo Alto and Stanford is when they have situations like this, they will paint the street a different color. They'll draw a clear line to marking, this is where the street ends and this is where other stuff like a parklet might happen. I'm just curious as to why wouldn't we do something like that here to, again, create that separation tell the drivers this is where you need to stay, maybe put some buttons on the street to, again, keep people from running in the corner of getting distracted by the parklet and then running into the corner of the bridge isn't something we want people to do. So I'm just curious, why don't we, I get that it's temporary in nature, and if you move it, you want to be able to see the stripes, but it looks ugly with the stripes there, and painting stripes doesn't take a lot of time or cost.
Yeah, maybe that's the architect might have some feedback on that, or any ideas on temporarily removing the striping.
Thank you.
Why don't we continue with clarifying questions, and then we'd be happy to invite the architect to comment. Commissioner Gorn?
Hey, just a quick question. It might be naive, but if the temporary structure has to be removed because one or both of the businesses go out of business, I assume that they're supposed to pay for the tear down. What if is there a provision if they can't?
Yes, and that would be written into the license agreement that I believe they would be charged for the removal, and that the city would, either have our public works crew remove it or hire a crew to remove it. So,
told you it was naive.
No, I want to add on just a comment also, because there's been some clarifying questions that I've suggested about use of the public right of way, which is really important. And just for the good of the order here, there's a fee for a license agreement. It's not significant, but this is not a gift of public land. There's significant number of requirements associated with a license agreement that you won't see in your coastal development permit. They have to do with indemnification, insurance, fee, monitoring, terms, renewals, etc. So that's kind of the business end of it. And we appreciate all your questions about that, because it's really important, and it is another part of this review, which should be a city council consideration.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Benjamin. Unmute, please, Commissioner Benjamin.
Probably easier to hear me now. I apologize. I appreciate Jill's comments. Those are what I had envisioned, and not surprising, but always comforting. And it does sort of touch on that chicken and egg question that I think we're all kind of implicitly dealing with, is that details are in the license agreement, but the license agreement gets negotiated after the permit. I think I've been in this situation in the past a long time ago, and we often got a draft agreement, and we ended up saying, if this is the actual approved agreement, we're good with it, or something like that. And I'm not here to propose the right approach, but I will say that it is a little awkward not having the details of the agreement in place. I feel a little bit like I'm being asked for a pig in a poke a little bit. So I'll be poking around to see if there are ways that we can solidify a few of those details, like how the public gets to use it, that I asked about earlier. But I do appreciate that there has to be some order. Thank you.
Any further clarifying questions? Any further response from staff or the architect that makes sense at this point, do you think, Scott?
Yes, I know Ed Love is logged in this evening. He may have some thoughts on the striping.
Well, if so, we'd be happy to hear from him.
Should be coming up. There he is. Ed, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you. As far as the striping, yeah, there's no problem with painting over the tails of the striping that's coming out into the street. We didn't even consider that, but certainly would look a little tidier, I guess, if that was done.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Is the applicant amenable to the changes proposed by the AAC, which are in the staff report?
Yes, I think we've already done them on the plans.
Great.
Any other questions for Ed while he's here? All right. Well, thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
Let us move to invite members of the public who are in attendance who may wish to comment on this application. If you wish to address the commission, please raise your virtual hand at this point.
We have none.
Okay. In that case, let us go to deliberations from planning commissioners, and Commissioner Hernandez, please lead off.
So I have to say, generally speaking, I love the concept of parklets. I know there's a balancing act between public use and private use, and I look to the city to negotiate those things in good faith with the feedback we've given that it's not business hours. The public should have a right to use the space. And, we should just make sure that, in the event that the business has to remove this, either because they go out of business or for whatever reasons, then the city's not unreasonably left on the hook to cover the cost of removing them. I will say, I think this project is fantastic. I love it at this location. It removes what is an eyesore for the driver. Maybe not so much for the person sitting in the restaurant, but anybody who's walking around Half Moon Bay or biking or driving sees the barricades that are really ugly and, not very pleasing, and sees something that is more akin to what places like San Carlos, Palo Alto, and San Francisco are putting in place. And I think this is a great first step to making more of these permanent parklets, and I'm very, very supportive of it. I think this is a lovely design, and, we've thought through issues about future projects with respect to the Main Street Bridge, fire considerations. I like the adjustments that have been made to integrate the parklet into the overall architectural structure, and the lighting changes, and, the fairy lights look great. So very supportive of this, and I'd love to see more of these types of projects in the future.
Thank you for that. Vice Chair Polgar.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow on Commissioner Hernandez's comments, because I'd basically like to echo all of them. I'm very supportive of this project, really excited, especially for this location, to see it move forward. And I also feel comfortable with staff clarifying, in the process of the lease agreement and everything, going ahead and clarifying the public-private use timeframe, et cetera. I think it would, if it's at all possible, and I realize this is for, Public Works, maybe to decide that the painting over the lines just would make it that much more classy. The little lines sticking out, if that's possible to paint over them, because that was one of my thoughts. It was the only thing I was kind of looked at, and I was like, eh. So that's a minor thing, but if that were possible, I would definitely be in favor of that. The only thing that a comment that I had, and I realized that this is one of my clarifying question was about the tables on the sidewalk. And one of the challenges I think that this area and a lot of the sidewalks along Main Street face, which is fine. I mean, it's a small town kind of feel and stuff, but they're already pretty narrow. And now with the box that would be around the, that fire structure. First of all, I like the design of that. I think that's great with the copper top. I think that looks fine. And also it covers definitely an eyesore. So not opposed to that. I'm just pointing out that if you look at the designs, I think it's A102, it'd be the page number. I might have gotten that wrong. If you look at the pathway that kind of people have to then snake around, there's kind of, I just am a little worried that we're constricting the walking pathway for people on the sidewalk, because now you have that structure to block the fire pipes and such, and then having tables and chairs on the sidewalk. It's a little, I think that's maybe not as friendly to the walking public as we maybe should be, or considerate of the fact that people might start walking into that little structure that's been built to block the fire pipes. So that I have a concern about that. I love the project though, otherwise, and that's not a deal breaker or anything. I just am raising that as something to be consider, because we are changing the amount of walking space and the pathway that people would have to walk in that area. And I do think it's already, it's not too small, but it's already a little bit of a narrow area and a very popular area for obviously for walking. All right, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gorn.
Just to piggyback on that comment, we also haven't talked about the servers going back and forth with hot dishes. So it is an issue. I think the project is so nice. I don't know if there's a solution to that issue. It definitely is an issue. And I appreciate all the comments by Commissioner Hernandez and others about the public use and identifying what is public use for that area. Again, like I can't, if there's a solution, maybe staff can come up with it. Maybe there's something in the future when you're revisiting this to look at that, because it is going to be a little problematic. That's going to be the one sort of issue for people is navigating that narrow corridor. So, but that wouldn't stop me from saying yes to this. This is great.
Thanks for that. Commissioner Benjamin.
Yes, thank you. So I agree with my colleagues. I would like to clarify that business hours is vague. What I heard in the staff report was lunch hours and dinner hours, and I would like to get clarity on that. I realize, again, this is that tension between what we nail down here and what its value is and what they pay us, us being the city, not the Planning Commission, as a fee for the use of this space. I feel, when I visited the site for the restoration view, I brought my bicycle, and obviously there's the temporary parklet is in place. And as a planning commissioner, I really felt like I was in the restaurant when I walked onto the sidewalk. And I made a mental note that I felt like I shouldn't feel that way. Even at lunch hour, that sidewalk should still be extremely welcoming to members of the public. And if it's necessary for the tables on the street to adapt to by having a broader space to operate on the sidewalk, I would be supportive of that, because I think those pedestrians are limited by the existing plan. If what we get is an addition to the existing on sidewalk activity, I don't know, it made me a little uncomfortable, I'll say. So I don't know, again, because this is a chicken and egg thing with the permit, maybe what's needed is for the motion to include a sense of the commission, if any of my colleagues feel the same way I do about this. to be incorporated in the motion that the license permit should ensure the convenience of the pedestrian is preserved, and that they don't feel like they're walking into a restaurant by using the sidewalk. Otherwise, I thought it is a lovely project. I hope it continues. I would certainly enjoy patronizing it. I would enjoy using it as a space when it's not in use, provided it was very clear when that time was. Those are the things that I would like to see clarified in the motion if any of my colleagues share my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Benjamin. I'll say that I strongly support this project primarily because I've been educated over the last 4 or 5 years about the growing popularity of such parklets and the benefits that they have brought to downtown areas and business areas. I've seen a number of presentations on this at perhaps at our meetings, but also at gatherings like the League of Cities conferences, and I do believe in that. There's often, as you all know, tension between people who hate to see parking disappear in downtown areas, but I think it continues to be proven by the increasing popularity of these things that isn't really the trade-off, that people will find places to park nearby and still patronize, hopefully in greater numbers than before, the businesses around the parklets. It did make me think, and this is a little bit off the wall, but I would love it if there was a better wayfinding about the parking that exists off of Main Street. In this location to both the east and the west of Main Street, a block in both directions, there are somewhat small parking lots, but they're the best that we have. And it's unclear to me whether residents and visitors are fully aware of that. I don't think that I would be in favor of burdening the applicant in this case with creating and paying for such wayfinding, but I'm open to any ideas that the city or the rest of us might have on that. I also am philosophically in favor of what Commissioner Gorn and Commissioner Benjamin have raised about the desire to make the sidewalk continue to be a pleasant experience for those who are going through and beyond the parklet. I wouldn't pretend to have any immediate flashes of genius about how that can be done, but it's certainly worth thinking about. Commissioner Hernandez?
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. I mean, it's a public right of way, and I think it needs to be welcoming as a matter of law, as a matter of communication to people of maybe there is signage, I don't know, but certainly with the layout of the tables and so forth, it needs to, and the foot traffic, it needs to be something that is welcoming in the implementation. I think city staff's perfectly capable of balancing that act. The challenge we have, and the reason why I called out the bump in for the parklet, is if you're going to take the parking, take the parking. If people are protected, push the parklet further out. There are aesthetic reasons why you may not want to do that, fine. The challenge we have throughout the city, as I was reminded when I was in front of Cafe Society Saturday morning having coffee with my daughter, is that our sidewalks aren't very wide, and we have these sort of walking paths, and then we have these obstructed paths with trees in them, fire hydrants in them, signage in them, and oftentimes, like in Cafe Society, where ironically Harpo there had proposed the first parklet in the city, he's put up tables and chairs in the non-walking part of the sidewalk. right? There's no path there. So we do have kind of a bigger challenge with the city that I don't think can be addressed here. But, if there's a way to encourage, maybe pushing the parklet back a little bit if it doesn't, affect the aesthetics or and doesn't require us to review it again, I'd be supportive of that, and put that in the discretion of city staff. But it's a more generalized problem. And as I think city staff indicated, there's already chairs and tables there today. So this isn't a new use. It's probably something we just need to think about, maybe under a different project or a different, some different other way of looking at it. But I am supportive of that general concept of just need to make sure this is a walkable, accessible space because it is a public right of way, and the licensing agreement needs to be revocable if that public right of way isn't protected.
Thank you for that. I realize I forgot to mention a moment ago, I wanted to thank Commissioner Hernandez for pointing out the desirability of removing those remnant stripes that today delineate parking places and replacing that with something that is more colorful, more obvious, a safety feature to separate the roadway from the parklet. And I don't think it isn't a question of tidying it up. It is a question of public safety and some kind of a clearly different colorized stripe along the outside of that wall or something, I think would be very appropriate. Commissioner Benjamin. Unmute yourself, please.
I apologize. The dog was barking. I just wanted to thank you for attributing to Commissioner Gwynn and I the concern about the sidewalk, but it's important to say that it was Vice Chair Pulgar who raised that issue initially, and David and I just piled on.
Oh, my bad. I do apologize for that.
And further, I think that I have no concern about trying out the idea. I understand that the permit expires if the CDP expires if the license expires. Is this a temporary permit? What's the mechanism through which that happens?
So I jump in here. I want to confirm that you're asking about the mechanism about the expiration of a license agreement.
No, actually, you're reading between the lines right. What I'm trying to figure out is whether if the coastal development permit is temporary, then we could come back in a year and say, that sidewalk really feels closed, and it feels, maybe they posted hours that say you can use it, but it's 6-point type and you can't read it very far away, and it really feels like an extension of the restaurant. And we would like that to be changed before we approve a continuation. Or maybe by being silent on those details, we're giving a permanent coastal development permit and saying it's a blank check. You can do whatever the city negotiates in its permit. Is it one of those two things? And if so, which?
I'm not sure that it's either of those two things. The license agreement will have terms, for example, a standard term that you should expect to see would be that ADA access must be maintained. And for example, if there's, what we would normally do is have our community preservation officer walks up and down Main Street from time to time when Sidewalk Cafe starts to get real active, especially during COVID times when outside dining is really important, and measures and make sure that that is maintained. When we have repeat encroachments in that space, then there's definitely more of a conversation about that. But this is the kind of violation or challenge that we would expect to possibly remove some tables and chairs on a complete pathway if it just wasn't working out for revocation of the license agreement. A revoked license agreement, the way we've structured this would, it would be the end, it would be the expiration of the coastal development permit. So they're going hand in hand. Your comments about the experience of the sidewalk environment for the comfort level of pedestrians and understanding that the space is not privatized is a very important component of the design. It's also, though, what we've seen over time, there's other comfort levels by having that space around you as you're walking, because it is activated, it is safe, because you have people on the street and folks looking around. And so there's layers to how this works in an engaged town environment like this. And we think we can help enable this to be successful along the lines of what we're hearing discussed tonight. I also want to note, in addition to this particular application, staff has been working on a parklet program for downtown as a whole that we will be bringing to the Planning Commission for more of an overarching coastal development permit, which your input tonight on this particular application is really helpful for us in thinking through design requirements as well as design guidelines and intentions around that. I hope that answered your question to some extent. We hadn't intended to term the CDP. I'm really not prepared to have to bring it back to the Planning Commission or things like this on a routine basis when I think staff is able to manage it. City Hall is in the middle of downtown. It's pretty easy for folks to get out and about and take a look at what's going on Main Street, and staff does that routinely. We even have a staff member who walks up and down with our Chamber of Commerce with Crystalline. So there's a lot more going on than you might see.
To be clear,
I assures you.
Yeah, I am not advocating. I did not mean to advocate that this should be an annual renewal or something like that. Because of the chicken and egg aspect of the permit and the license, I was trying to figure out what the fallback mechanism was if the community felt like their interests in being able to access the sidewalk or to use the public space because the business hours, the lunch hours, and the dinner hours were too extended and made them feel unwelcome. If there was a way to remedy that. And that's not to suggest that there will be problems. The question isn't, what is the prior restraint that we should impose, because we don't know. It's the question of what is the mechanism to resolve that problem at some point in the future if it occurs. I appreciate the point that Commissioner Hernandez made about the existing activity at Harpo's. I thought that was a salient example. This particular stretch is quite a bit longer than that, and so it has a sort of a more impactful feel, which again is not to say that it's not a great development. I personally am a fan of parklets. I appreciate the acquisition of space that we had surrendered to cars in general. I value that. So I'm supportive of this project. I'm trying to think through the contingencies a little bit here. That's all.
Thank you. Vice Chair Polgar.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up, and I don't know that I ever heard if staff had information about why the parklet doesn't extend further out than it does, and maybe I missed the answer to that, but that was one question. And I still am. I guess my concern around when I brought up the enclosure now around the pipe is that it's more even just a safety issue, because I think it's basically you're asking people to walk around something that's and that was more, and whether there had been a consideration of that, or there's flexibility in where maybe the tables are outside of Barterra, maybe they're actually up against the building, so that you kind of direct people away from that so they don't just walk straight into it. Not that I would ever do anything like that, but I just was like, for example, on the other side of the bridge, on the north side of the bridge, when you come around, there's like a sign there that I had literally run into many times. And it's just because like when you think that your path is straight and you have, ready to go, it's amazing how you just can plow into something. So it was really more around this. It was actually around a safety issue. I do have the concerns about making sure the public is, feels welcome. I will also say, I think people are getting more comfortable in general when they visit places in the US with having parklets like this. And so I think that it's also just a matter of like seeing it more and recognizing that this is a public-private space and feeling that comfort. So I think can be, granted I fully agree with Commissioner Benjamin that like if there's violations of that or things like that, then I trust the city to be monitoring that and all. But I actually think that people are getting more comfortable and familiar. I'm a little concerned about that spot just for a safety issue. And I do have a question. I was wondering if there a reason why it wasn't pulled all the way out to the edge of the parking, if maybe that was a safety issue or what, because that might also create a little extra space. That was just a clarifying question that came up.
That buffer is important to the chair. Best practices give a little more leeway between the hard edge of the parklet and the width of the travel lane. I think if you want more details on that, maybe Jonathan, our city engineer staff who's here with us could address that. But that's pretty standard, and I think you'll see that in other cities. And certainly, it would have been nice to use it all. It would have helped some of the other spacing needs. Through the chair, I do notice that the proprietor of Barterra she has her hand raised. Ginger Letty is here, and I know your public hearing is over, but we've been talking an awful lot about their hours of operation and tables and chairs in front of their business, and I just wonder if you might want to allow for that.
Yes, I'll open the public hearing for that.
Ginger, you should be able to unmute. There.
I did. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your time and everything that's been going on tonight and all of your consideration. I just wanted to address the tables outside of the tasting room that are up next to the building. That has always been a handicap accessible space so that there's no impingement on people being able to get there. And then the rest of it, which you have seen, is kind of what we call, a streetery, and then versus the parklet. And the parklet will give us a huge advantage because coming out from the sidewalk onto the parklet, it would be an even level as opposed to, at that point, I think it's a 6 or 7 inch gap between the sidewalk and the curb. So it's a much more ADA compatible situation, as well as something that would be much easier for us to serve. So just a few comments, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your remarks. Further commissioner deliberations? Does staff feel like there are additional responses that you want to make at this point? No? Are we ready for a motion then?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? Because the comment about the 6-inch drop off brought to my attention when I go get donuts in front of Main Street and go over to the Half Moon Bay Bakery, I always caution my daughter not to fall into the drainage under the sidewalk. And it's kind of a joke. When she was little, it was a realistic concern. But I do notice that there is drainage underneath, right in front of the Barterra building, actually. Can you just clarify, like, there's no impact to the drainage. You've looked at this, you've thought about this. We're not going to create some kind of drainage issue. We're not going to block the drains. I know that we're going to level the sidewalk with the design, but there's no impact from a flow of water down the streets perspective.
Yes, that's correct. So we worked closely with engineering staff to make for certain that the parklet design wouldn't impact the drainage within the gutter itself. And then also one of our AAC members is really keyed into, functionality and structural, and he also had some thoughts and ideas to enforce what the conclusions that engineering made. So we do not anticipate any drainage concerns with the proposed parklet.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Commissioner Benjamin. Unmute yourself, please.
Darn dog. So I move the resolution next in order. I would be interested in adding the sense of the commission that we would like to maintain the welcoming quality of the sidewalk to pedestrians. But I think after the conversation, maybe everybody's comfortable that we've talked about that and it doesn't need to be in the motion. So I'll just go with the resolution.
I agree with you on that, and Vice Chair Polgar seconds it.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Gorn.
Yes, absolutely.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Yes.
Vice Chair Polgar.
Yes.
And Chair Ruddick.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
I think we're near the end of tonight's agenda. Are people okay forging ahead? Commissioner Gorn, you had your hand up.
Just don't forget the minute. Don't forget
the chair. We had a menu, a change in the agenda. I'm prepared to support the minutes at this point.
Well, let me do this. The next item on the agenda is application for expanded cell tower at 525 Kelly. Jill, you'll have to tell us. I think we're just to vote to continue that.
Could you please consider that again? You continued this item to the date certain at your December 14th meeting. And staff just got a bit overwhelmed over the next few weeks with a number of things, and it just isn't ready. So we would appreciate continuing to January 25th.
Certainly. I'm sure we have a motion to that effect, please. Commissioner Benjamin.
I'm making that motion.
To continue to January 25th meeting.
Thank you. I've got to learn to use my words. When the dog barks, I lose
it. I second moving to the January 25th.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Gorn.
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Yep.
Vice Chair Polgar.
Yes.
And Chair Ruddick.
Yes.
Motion approves.
All right, on to the minutes. It is the hour of the minutes. Vice Chair Polgar.
sorry, earlier when I was waiting my turn. So there were a couple things that I did want to just point out that I think might have gotten missed. And so I just wanted to make sure that under there was a comment under the bicycle section about the commissioner comments. There were some comments about Highway 1, and I think that they came out as being the crossing across Highway 1, but it was actually the connection to bicycle crossing on Highway 1. That was because I think the comment was not about the Caltrans, obviously Highway 1 Caltrans. So that was just something that it was the connection, getting connected to the crossing. And then another one that didn't seem to be captured was traffic calming the east side. There were comments about the east side lacking traffic calming in the proposal, and that was something that was needed. So that, and then the other, I think that there was under parking, it looks like there was one of the comments about, it says the parking, I lost my place in this, I had looked at it earlier. I think there's just a word missing, reflecting that the parking above organic material versus pavement, like that was the comparison, was that it's better to avoid having runoff onto pavement that run for runoff, I think it said. And then another one that had to do with there's a question that was in there about tree wells, but I think there was actually a comment about the tree wells on the east side of Poplar, and it was actually more specific. It was about the impinging upon the sidewalk walking, the pedestrian path. And then one other thing that had to do, I think there was definitely, I didn't see captured the comments about the paving around the trees and the impacts to, I think there was the concern about the space, but also the paving around the trees that will remain, and impacts to those trees. So that's something that I didn't see captured under the tree and landscaping. And I apologize that I didn't get this to staff earlier. It's been a little bit of a crazy time for me. So.
Yeah, Bridget, I imagine if that's difficult to capture in this environment, that Sarah or others of us could help you out with those details for those edits to the minutes. Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes, thank you. And again, I want to apologize to my colleagues, to staff and the public for somehow finding the old reports rather than the new minutes, which were certainly there now. So thank you for your forbearance. I want to agree with Vice Chair Polgar with the points that she raised. I do recall that in the conversation. I also recall mentioning the idea that we should be evolving to having cohorts of trees so that they weren't all getting planted at the same time, growing at the same time, and dying at the same time. We had talked about the idea of staggering the plantings by year so that we would maintain some kind of continuous trees. And then I would imagine the typo corrections that Chair Ruddick mentioned, there were probably many that I missed, but I did appreciate the blub outs versus the bulb outs. I'm sure that those got fixed. So I enjoyed them. Thank you. And those were the changes the only changes I had in mind beyond what was said.
I don't think I'm allowed to comment on the minutes, so I will send a letter to the city because I have concerns about the nature of the comments that were captured, so I will send that separately. And I'll send that to you, Jill and Winter, and you can figure out what to do with it.
All right, so
maybe I was going to ask, perhaps this is a question for Ms. King, but should these minutes be considered as a whole with two of us recused from any vote on it, or is it kosher to divide the minutes up into segments of the meeting?
Good question. I mean, I think they are divisible, so you could have a segregated motion, I suppose, on the minutes for the agenda item for the Poplar Street, just to be extra safe. And I guess in that circumstance, the two conflicted commissioners who didn't have their names pulled out of the hat should probably, turn off their monitors for the motion to approve the portion that was for the Poplar Street project.
Okay. Well, should we, I'm sorry, Commissioner Gorn, a new hand?
Well, just curious, why is there an urgency to approve the minutes tonight? Can we just do it at the next meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's best practices for a public body to do that promptly while while it's fresh in everybody's minds. But if I'm wrong about that, I'd be glad to hear.
We would really appreciate having the minutes, at least of the Planning Commission's deliberations and direction, because work is being done on the design of this project, and having approved minutes with the modifications that Vice Chair Holger and Commissioner Benjamin added to this particular item is really helpful to us. So we would appreciate it if they're ready to go. If they're not ready to go and you need to see revisions, that's fine. I will note I was typing very quickly while Vice Chair Holger was speaking, and I can read off all those items if that would provide any reassurance on that.
Yeah, my sense is that it's an important topic, and it's not a slam dunk to capture such detail orally. So that would be a good checking mechanism for us to go through.
Can I make a motion that we separate this out and just let's approve the thing we can approve separately, and then because I don't think even Commissioner Roddick and I should be even participating in the review of the minutes. So I don't want to create an issue for myself or for the commission. So I'd like to propose we follow your advice, Jill, and separate these items out. And let's do that, and then you can call us back when you're done.
I like that. Maybe we could, if there are no comments on the minutes of the other part of that meeting, could we have a motion to approve those? And then Commissioner Hernandez and I will exit the meeting while you consider the Poplar project minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone can vote. All right, Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Gorn.
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Yes.
Vice Chair Polgar.
Yes.
And Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Okay. That minutes have been approved outside of Poplar, everything but Poplar.
All right, I am stopping my video now, and we'll return when you all have finished with the next segment.
Okay.
deliberations. In the bicycle section, the comment should be about connecting to the crossing of Highway 1 and not about the actual crossing. The east side lacks traffic calming. Parking over organic matter is better than over pavement. Tree wells on the east side of Poplar would impinge on the sidewalk. Consider impacts that pavement may have on trees. Consider staggering tree plantings. And I think that's staggered in terms of timing.
Cohorts, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Fancy.
Okay, any other colleagues?
Those are all the ones I have.
Yes, that was accurate. And yeah, and I think it was, just to be clear, you said paving around the trees, that was the paving and around the trees. Is that I missed?
Yeah, I remember making the comment. It was the idea that the asphalt could impinge on roots far away from the trunk. And the question was, how do we ensure that we're protecting those trees and don't begin a slow death that would be premature?
Yeah, because we had discussed that there are trees that we talked about bulb outs, and then we were pointing out the other trees that also could use that consideration. So that was it. Okay, thank you very much for capturing. Thank
you for your careful notes. And before we call the question on these minutes, I want to just check in with you, David, and see if there's something that you feel we need to delegate to. Is there a reason that we should hold off on this to a later meeting? I want to know what your thoughts are.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm fine.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, let's call the question. Can I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes as revised.
As revised. A second, please.
Sure, I'll second.
Bridget?
Commissioner Gorin?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Folger?
Yes.
Motion approved, 3-0.
Thank you.
Yep.
Steve, come back.
Yeah. Commissioner Hernandez is on mute, so let me just get him back.
We're back.
There you go.
I believe that brings us to the director's report.
It does, and I'll tell you, we've had a bit of a discombobulated kickoff to 2022 with already having to close City Hall again, and we've had some health impacts, and we're being very careful. So I can say that your next meeting, we certainly hope you'll have that antenna. We'd like to take care of that. I will be out, and so you can expect to have Greg Garrison, who was the project planner for that item. He will sit in for my role. We'll probably have a light agenda that night, and kicking into February, we're looking forward to bringing Main and Kelly to you. It has completed architectural review after quite a few rounds, and that should be coming your way at the end of probably your second February meeting. I have seen some interest from Commissioner about some training, and I know it came up again tonight in a reference about the league's training for which they do, I think in the spring. I think it's coming up soon, where they talk about pertinent things like parklets. So staff is looking around for training opportunities. If there's any subject area that you're interested in, please send that our way. Next week, the City Council meeting, we don't have any items on it, and I'm not as tuned into it as I should be. I have just gotten very, very behind with all that's going on here, and staff is scrambling. And you can just thank Scott for all the work he did tonight for these two items. He had them all under control. We are very busy working on the housing element. There was state legislation that reduced our timeline for preparing it while we were underway. And that's for not just for the city of Half Moon Bay, but for everyone in our regions. So it was moving the goalposts basically while we had a work plan and we're picking away at it. So you're going to start to see a lot of that. We look forward to it. And we are going to have an update from your joint session with City Council on housing that we had back in November. So lots is at hand. If you have any questions about what staff is up to, do let us know. We're not at City Hall for the most part, but you'll see a couple folks are in there. And we really do hope that this current phase that we're going through is really short and I get back at it. We really do prefer to work in person and provide direct customer service to our residents.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, we extend my sympathy for what it must be like going through that with your workplace, closing and opening and closing, and it must be very, very distressing. But I think nobody will look back on the COVID experience and say, well, we were too careful. So I'm sure it's the right thing to do. Do planning commissioners have communications to share? Commissioner Benjamin. Guess what, Jimmy?
Sorry, so sorry. So just one in passing, when Jill mentioned trainings, I had noticed that there was an interesting agenda at the Yosemite Leadership Conference. It's, I think, a potentially valuable possibility. The trigger, I think, is early spring, so it's a pretty short time frame. So I hope that we can get clarification. I mean, it's also a meeting in the era of COVID. Maybe by spring it will be, Omicron will have burned across and no longer be an issue. But I think something came across our transom a while back, and obviously we can't send too many commissioners. But if people are interested, I just wanted to be sure it was on your radar. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I know people who've gone to that in the past and spoke highly of it. Any other communications?
I just want to thank the city staff for all the hard work they've been doing under these crazy circumstances. It's really, really hard to work with COVID, and especially the type of work that's very hands-on and very engaged with the public. So kudos to all of you for your hard work.
Yes, indeed. If there's nothing further, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would entertaining your motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'm not sure if Jimmy actually made the motion, so I'll go ahead and make the motion to close the meeting.
I'll second this motion.
Moved and seconded.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Gorn.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Sure.
Vice Chair Polgar. And, oh, she went mute, unmute.
Yes.
And Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Motion approved. You may adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.